Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
Let's get it. I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. It's your host, Helen Edwards and
January Liddell. Aloha. So today we have our special guest. He's actually a really good friend of mine. I've known him since he was 10, and he is the owner and founder of Xtreme Financial. His previous life, he was in law enforcement for 19 years, retired at the age of 38. 17 years earlier than his colleagues, and he tripled his income on the side. He also juggled real estate during his career, and he started growing Xtreme. Now it's more than 18. I think it's like 24 states. Danny can correct me later. But he has colleagues in 24 states. So Xtreme is gonna rule all 50 states, I'm sure. He's a sought out speaker, spoken live in front of audiences as large as 10,000 people. He published several articles and also a contributor to Entrepreneurial magazine. Find him on Instagram. He has over 100,000 followers. All right. So without further, actually, the other thing I wanted to mention about Danny is that he's a true leader in the essence of a leader, meaning that he's in the trenches with us, and he talks to each individual, as if he's the only one, or we're the only ones that he's talking to. So he makes us feel special. He makes us feel heard. So I'm very honored to introduce Danny Singson. Danny, welcome to our show.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Jan. Appreciate it. It's good to be here. My pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started, Danny. Tell us your story.
Just in business in general, or just kind of the journey of the path?
The journey to Xtreme.
Well, like you mentioned, just as a kind of a quick blip there, in my journey, I started off in my career path in law enforcement. I was a cop for 19 years, and that was like literally my dream job, dream career, since I was a little boy, right? So I always wanted to serve and help others, and that was kind of the thing that I was very much drawn to. And it was just my personality type. I wanted to kind of defend others from harm, amongst those that couldn't defend themselves in a sense. So when I went through that career, I was probably the youngest guy selected in the history of that department. I started when I was 20 years old. I was in the academy, and I got selected out of 134 applicants, and they were only hiring one guy, right? So I didn't think I would, stand out, but all my preparation, all my, pre-planning and intentions pretty much kind of paid off. So as I was going through my career, I learned, man, this is really, really fulfilling. And this is something just that I just super passionate about. I want to excel. I was always very big into excelling in everything that I did. And that was no different. So I got into, the motorcycle. I rode the motorcycle for like 5-6 years. I worked traffic very early on in my career. Because I grew up watching, remember that show Chips, right? With what was it? Ponch and John, right? And I just remember like, I gotta ride a motorcycle. And so that was something that was, even to this day, I'm super proud of, because it was like the motor school that I was sent to had like a 50-60% failure rate. Right. So just because you get sent there as a specialty position doesn't mean you're going to pass. So moving forward, I really wanted to help other officers, right, do the job well, because I think my mindset was, man, if I can go out there and serve the community at the highest capacity, I want to make sure that my team and the people that are around me, if I can have any influence on them, I want to be able to do that. So I became a field training officer. They call it FTO for short. So I started becoming one of the trainers of the cops, and I was the axeman, if you will. I was in phase 3 of that program. So they had to get through Danny in order to keep their job. And I was highly critical about it, right? Highly critical about every little thing they did. And I didn't take it lightly because it was life or death, really, right? You make a mistake, and sometimes a mistake could be fatal in that line of work. I went through, that kind of, and I got my first taste of leadership, Jan. And I thought, you know what? I really want to lead a team. So applied, and again, did well in promotions. I got promoted to sergeant, and I was in charge of a patrol team. And that was really humbling because I was one of the youngest supervisors or managers in the department, and got a lot of crap for it. But my experience and just my attitude and my performance kind of spoke for itself. Moving forward, I always had that entrepreneur itch. Ever since, by the way, what I failed to mention was since I was a teenager, I did things like Amway, right? Herbalife, and I always wanted to be number one. I always was like, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to be the best. I remember at 16, I mean, I don't know if you even know this, but I know at 16, I had like a team of like 100 something people, right? And I was doing board presentations and speaking in my living room. My mom was yelling at me and things like that. What are you doing? Right. So very early on, I knew that I wanted to excel in something, right? Whether it's business, something. So I always had that bug. And while I was in law enforcement, that bug did not disappear. And I thought, you know what? I wanted to expand my thoughts, my skills, my perspective in business. I got into real estate, got my license, and I started to sell real estate, residential real estate within the peninsula area, within my kind of area, right? And I actually did pretty good. Didn't think that my skill sets dealing with people in law enforcement would have any role to play in that. And it actually really parlayed very well because real estate is a people business. And if you could gain someone's attention and influence them to make decisions, it was really no different. So my experience in law enforcement had a lot of parallels with sales, and I excelled. I actually sold my way into this brokerage. I started off with Century 21 real estate firm. And then I outgrew that firm. I was like, man, I wanted to be part of an agency that had more market share, that was more visible within the area that I was actually serving. And so I applied for Coldwell Banker, if you guys have heard of that brand. And I remember the broker said, we don't hire part-time agents. I go, define part-time. So I started to challenge him already. Define part-time. Because I see a lot of agents, here full-time doing nothing. And he says, well, you have a full-time, you're a cop. I was like, yeah, true. But that doesn't mean that I can't put in full-time effort. Right. And long story short, he took a chance on me, and I pissed off a lot of agents in that particular office because I started to work their open homes and, with their permission, all that. And I started to gain traction in sales from scratch and created a name for myself. So if you met me in the real estate world, you would be none the wiser. You would even know that I was in law enforcement unless you saw me or came across me in uniform, right? Because I really separated that skill, and I got obsessed. I was the guy watching $1 Million Listing, with Josh Altman and, all those guys, right? And learning every little thing I could, absorbing language. How did they close that sale? How do they influence that seller to sign a listing agreement? How do they get that buyer to really pull the trigger, right? So I started to learn the language of influence, right? And I studied leadership prior to that because as a sergeant, I wanted to excel in the leadership role. I went to this leadership academy in Palo Alto for law enforcement. It was kind of a prestigious school. And then, after doing the job for a while, Jan, it just became a long ass job, honestly. I got really kind of jaded with the politics, the internal backstabbing. And, most people may not know this, but there are probably more bad guys internally than there are bad guys, us fighting outside on the street. It's really kind of a dog eat dog world internally. And a lot of people don't see that side of the world. So that side of the industry. And it was really against the grain of kind of who I was and my values and, my spirit. Also too, because I was very intrigued with business. Like, I'm the kind of guy that wants to absorb everything about everything, right? I started to realize that my dreams and goals were bigger than my paycheck. And full transparency, I was making about, on average, about 150, 160 a year with my my law enforcement career. And I transitioned into real estate pretty seamlessly and started to get a taste of what it feels like to out earn the typical salary of my colleagues. And so I had a different perception of money. I was like, okay, if I could use my time differently than everyone else, and the only way others could make more money was to trade more time and work more overtime, I was like, nope. I started to refuse overtime very early on in my career when I started getting into real estate, because I want to hone in on my craft and develop some skill in that area. And even though perception-wise, I was losing opportunities to sign up for overtime all the time, guys were like, Danny, you don't want to take this shift, bro? That's easy money, bro. I'm like,
Would you say that this is your turning point when you switched into real estate and got that taste? Or was it something else that was bigger than that kind of was?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I'd like to say it probably was one of the turning points where I realized that I can apply a little bit more intelligence and thoughts to the way I earn income versus just doing grunt work and just clocking in and clocking out to earn $1, right? Because I believed that I was worth more than my paycheck. But here's the thing, my position was only worth so much. I felt I was worth more than my position's worth. And that was really ingrained in me. And people's identity walking around at the job. I mean, we're working here in the Bay Area in law enforcement, and a lot of people don't know this, but law enforcement in the Bay Area, they're averaging six figures, right? So it's not a big deal. But then again, it's relative to the geographical area, because $117,000 annual income in the San Francisco Bay Area, you're still considered low income, right? So it's all relative. It's all relative. But yeah, to really kind of hone in on your question, Helen, yeah, that was one of the turning points. I was like, screw this. I don't need to work 12 hours or 24 hours, 48 hours extra to get more money. I wanted to create some kind of value in the marketplace and work towards a goal. And so when I sold my first couple of properties, I was like, oh, wow, I got a check for 20 grand. Right. And I didn't look at it like, oh, okay, I made an extra 20,000 for the year. I kind of compartmentalized that check, and I was like, I made $20,000 extra this month, and I didn't have to work no damn 48 hours. Now it's all relative too, right? Because all the time invested into, the actual business, speaking with clients, going back and forth. It wasn't me literally looking at the clock. If I did the work within 2 to 3 hours, right? It did change. It did change my way of thinking of how I earned income, because it was no longer time out and then money in. It was value out, money in, right? And so, but then I started to realize when I started to grind, because I was working pretty much 24 hours a day. I was attached to my phone pretty much every day, and I worked nights, and then in my job, and then I worked real estate during the day. So I literally burned the candle on both ends. And so I got used to that rhythm, and I was working out, and I did these bodybuilding competitions. So I was just like, I'm just trying to overachieve in everything that I was doing, right? I wanted to excel on all levels. And at one point in real estate, I'd crossed over the 6-figure mark in income. I remember the first time that happened. It was probably like my second year in real estate. And I thought, wow, that wasn't too difficult. But I didn't think or feel that I could leave the job, because those opportunities were very scarce. Those opportunities were like not consistent, right? And I thought, just like everyone else trying to think about being an entrepreneur, right? The biggest fear is to leave their consistent, stable income. And very early on, I thought, man, that just sucks. I'm kind of shackled here because of that fear. What would change that? So I got into financial services, actually insurance, retirement planning, and I started to learn more about money and just how it works, and what most people in society, what they actually try to do with their personal finance, but no one ever teaches kind of money in school. And I just got obsessed. I got massively obsessed with the thought, if I could learn more about money, I'd probably be the smartest guy in any room that I walk into regarding this subject. And I felt very empowered with that, because money is what makes the world go round. And if I have a little bit of an edge, a little bit of knowledge and expertise on that subject matter, I found that I could somehow influence the world around me, the people around me. And as a side note, I could also start to realize how to monetize the world around me as well. And I really enjoyed that. I fully transitioned. I kind of burnt the bridge with my real estate career, if you will, because I didn't see an exit plan out of that. And you're only as good as your last sale, right? And then you're kind of hunting with a spear, looking for the next client. When I started to get into the insurance and financial planning, retirement planning aspect of what I do now, I really started to love that language, and I learned that I can help more people. I can create a bigger impact, and I started to realize that I really liked the frequency of opportunity and conversations that I had over real estate. In real estate, I was going from escrow to escrow. And in what I was doing now in financial services, I was like, wow, I can really just pick up the phone, and I don't have to get in front of an audience that were buying or selling real estate. It's now a universal subject matter that anyone can be a potential prospect or client. And I go, man, this is a huge opportunity. So I got to work. I learned the language, and in my humble beginnings, I quickly, again, my expectations for myself is to win. Like, I don't hope to win. I expect to, especially when I put in the amount of effort, the mind, focus to it, just like anything else. Like, if you put enough time and effort into anything, you're like, okay, well, I should be winning here. Right. So I started to do that, and I got kind of the bug. I actually completely abandoned my real estate license, didn't even renew it. That's kind of me burning the bridge. And I got my taste of being able to match my income on the side. So if you can imagine, and that was my first year in the business, year in the industry, I matched my income was, I made at least 150, right, on the side. And I thought to myself, man, what am I doing here? Every day I went to work, it became harder, because I was like, I don't need to be here. If someone gave me shit or crap, and I'm like, I don't really need to put up with this. Like, I have options.
So you matched your first year in the financial industry.
Yep.
On a part-time situation versus your full-time job, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah. And so I thought, if I could just match it, what was the next step? Let's double it. Right? Let's double it. And so that was these are my little benchmarks, right? And I thought, do I even have a possible chance to actually leave the job? At this point, I thought, wow, this is potentially possible. And I started to now do this little game with myself in my mind. And I thought, okay, let's buy some time back. How much do I need to make right? Every month to be able to kind of be free from the job. And so I basically just took the amount of income that I was earning net, right, at the job. And I thought, okay, if I earned at least that, I bought myself 30 days. So I did that time and time again. I thought internally, I don't know if this even makes sense, but what I did was I bought time. I was at the point where I had bought 2 years of time. And I thought to myself,
it almost sounds, just, I'm going to interject real quick.
Go ahead.
Danny, it almost sounds like you did your formula on yourself in retrospect.
Yeah.
You know, the formula you teach us and we help others with. It sounds like you did a little bit of that on yourself. Like your mindset was already in that place where you are now. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely use myself as I'm definitely the guinea pig always, because I'm not afraid to take risk if it's going to better me, right? Because you only have one you, right? So I thought, okay, I banked 2 years. Now what? I was pushing 300 grand on the side. And I thought, okay, do I have options? And I didn't even really want to seriously think about it because it was the scariest thing in the world for me to even consider leaving my career with a pension and the whole 9 yards. Nobody leaves a career path like that. Nobody, right? And and I didn't care. I didn't really care what my colleagues were saying. I didn't care about what all the naysayers were saying. I didn't care. So, because they weren't paying my bills, they weren't in charge of my goals or my dreams or things like that. And I just remember one fateful day, I thought to myself, I gotta leave, because I know that I can never hit new heights and discover and unlock new levels of Danny if I stayed at the job and if I was kind of having to separate my identity. Number one, it was exhausting. And number two, I could not continue with the charade of being at work when my mind and my heart was no longer there.
That's what I heard. I heard you say that it was not aligned with your values, and it was harder and harder to do law enforcement versus what you're doing, in the finance industry. And Danny, as long as I've known you, I think the beginning start of your burning desire and your intense drive started when you were a kid, because so Danny was bigger, right? He was like two people, like he was two persons, okay, in one. and this was like fifth grade. And then come 6th grade, so we were gone for that summer, right? And then the following school year, Danny was like this like slim down person, and all of us, like, Danny, I'm sure a lot of us like turned around, who's this guy? So I think it started from when you were younger, that intense burning desire to like just fulfill a goal, and ever since then you've remained that type of person, and then 10 times it, right? You've 10 times it now. I mean, look at you have your own firm. So going back to your firm, what was your, like, why did you decide to open up your own firm, and why not just be an agent? Like, what was that desire for you? Like, why did you decide to do that?
Let me touch on what you just mentioned, because I know you just dropped that bomb, and I want to put some context to that. You talked about me being bigger as a kid. Yeah, I was the fattest kid in my grade. And I peaked in 6th grade, Jan. I peaked in 6th grade. I was about 165 pounds in the 6th, and I was like yay high. I was a big boy, right? And you're right. I think that was definitely a huge turning point in my life growing up. And no one told me to do it. No one pressured me to do it. I just knew internally that, wow, I was sick and tired of just being that fat little boy. And as kids, we don't know like there's nutrition and fitness involved in the things that, you do. But I thought, I'm no longer going to eat for pleasure. I'm going to eat to survive. I don't know what the hell I did, but I did lose 55 pounds over summer vacation. And that was when I realized, Jan, that if I put my mind to something, this sounds so cliche, I know, but what if I can put my mind to something, right, and make a decision, I can freaking do it. So that set the tone for every decision and, anything that I was doing. I was like, okay, if I put my mind to it and I believe that this is what I want, this is where I need to be, I can do it. I went from that to entering in bodybuilding competitions. I won first place 3 times in my weight division. And I just took it to the opposite extreme, right? Seriously, that's just kind of where my mind is at. To answer your second part of the question, what was kind of the pivot to go from agent to agency owner? A lot of things, right? I grew up in larger agencies within the financial world, and I pay tribute to those agencies as to learning a little bit of, systems and disciplines and, learning what culture is like. But I'm also a very independent thinker. I'm really not a follower. I'm a good, loyal subject, and I will be a part. I'm a great team player and all that. But I'm not the guy that's just going to go, okay, yes, all right, and not ask any questions, right? I think good leaders, just in general, challenge the status quo, not because they're trying to be, a pain in the ass, but they're asking because, hey, I always had a genuine and curious mind to figure out if this is what we're doing, tell me why, because I can see better ways or more efficient ways to kind of do these things that are addressing a lot more variables along the way, like human nature, like first impressions, like likability, just things like that. And I'm like, if you're telling me to do this, and I started to experiment with my own ways that addressed psychology, right? Likability, things like that. How to avoid sales resistance, things like that, very early on, because I came with a bag of skills already, right? And I didn't want that to be just taken for granted. And I was going to use those skills. And I started to learn that I hit a ceiling. In my first agency, I was the number 1 agent in the organization within my team, if you will. There's a bigger kind of organization. And I was like, okay, again, this is not something that I hope to do. That's what I expected to do. And when I was getting awards and accolades and speaking on stage in front of everyone, I would be very, very hard on the audience. I'm like, hey, you guys are celebrating me, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything special. Number one. Number two is I don't claim to be the cream of the crop. And I'm not taking any offense. I'm not trying to, offend anyone here, but I don't know if I said this out loud, Jan, but on stage, in my mind, I was thinking that I wasn't the cream of the crop. In my mind, I know I didn't say this out loud, but in my mind, this is what I was thinking. I felt that I was the cream of the crap because most people around me weren't doing shit. Right? So you're going to celebrate me. And this is a false representation of, hey, I'm number 1 in the organization. But the reality is that most people aren't doing anything. So I'm like, do I want to be, is that good enough for me to be number 1, the cream of the crap? So I continue to excel and excel and excel. So here I was, right, in the game, if you will. And number 2 guy was like off the charts. Like you didn't even know where he was. There was such a large separation in the way my results were kind of forming that people were like, yeah, it must be nice. I go, but why don't you want to even ask? Why don't you want to even ask, right? What maybe I'm doing that's different than yours. And then when I found that people were asking, Jen, they weren't doing the things that I was saying that got me the results. And I was like, oh man, this is just silly, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with culture. And that agency kind of had a like an MLM type of culture around it where you're recruiting people, things like that. And then I started to question that as well. I'm like, why are we recruiting other agents before even acquiring any kind of skill or mastery? And you're further diluting the value of what we got here. I treated that the industry and the business, Jan, like a business. Like everything that I did during hours of operation was calendared on my calendar. I treated it like a job, because here's the reality. I treated it like my only source of income, even though I was still working in law enforcement at the time. Okay. 3 years, for 3 years, fast forward 3 years. And many people don't know this, but I literally called HR at my job and I said, hey, can you change the account for my direct deposit? And they're like, oh, sure, whatever. Right. They didn't ask me why. They just made the shift. What they didn't know is that I went to my bank and I opened up another personal checking and savings account, and they gave me a debit card and all that attached to it. I didn't take it. I said, keep it, shred it, do whatever you want with it. I don't want it. So my direct deposits from my paycheck at my job were going into this account that I had no access to. So even though it was coming to me, yes, I knew that, I didn't physically have access to it, or it was extremely inconvenient for me to access it. So I basically got used to not being paid.
What was the reason?
Because I want to give myself a taste of what it is to basically hunt and, kill what you eat, eat what you kill. And I wanted a true taste of entrepreneurship. Can I make it on my own without the support of my job? Right? Because a lot of people do not do the things that's required to go all in to get the results. Right? People want to play it safe. Like, oh, I'm just going to it's like the when and if. Like, when I do this, then I'll do this. When I achieve this, then I'll quit my job. I didn't want that sugarcoating. I just said, you know what?
You burned your bridge. I
did. I mean, even though it wasn't really a true burn, but it felt like it because I didn't have access. That money wasn't coming to me.
So, and it's brought you here to where you are today, right? With Xtreme One Financial.
Yeah. Yeah. So I left that first agency, guys, and just for personal reasons, culture, things like that. And I thought, okay, let me just, the culture wasn't in alignment with me. And I said, let me go to another one, right? Trying to look for this land of utopia. And again, it was more of the same. And then it was even more exaggerated with this whole MLM type of, feeling. And I'm not knocking on MLMs. I'm not at all. There's a difference between being, part of an MLM, understanding the difference between an MLM business model versus MLM culture. The culture is what wasn't really sitting well with me because it really interfered with my credibility, reputation in finance. Because when you talk to a client and they think you're part of some type of thing, they're turned off. They get really, kind of weary about you. And I'm like, I hated that. There were so many times I got missed opportunities. I probably lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in my lifetime just because of that perception alone. But when I went to that second agency, I became, I guess, people were calling me like this phenom. And I didn't think I was doing anything special. I was still kind of running and gunning for recognition, if you will, because a lot of people kind of run for recognition in the industry, right? Whether it's income, title, or whatever, right? So I was aiming for income because income is really an indication of, really what your results truly are. I had re-earned my 100K ring. These are all terms within the industry. They give you rings for hitting benchmarks in income, right? Annual income achievements. I got my 100K ring. I got my 250K ring. I got my $500,000 ring, all within my first six and a half months, I believe, within the new agency. And people are like, who the F is this dude? I basically changed the face of that company where people were like, what is he doing? Okay. And I was invited to speak on stage and I was kind of just laying it down, giving people brass tacks reality of what I was doing. But you know what was happening? No one was doing it. no one was doing what I was doing. And they continued to not do what I was doing because it wasn't supported by their leadership or their organization. So I realized, man, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with culture kind of pushing me down and restricting my growth. I literally had stopped business and submitting business, Jan, for about 6 months. Believe it, it was very difficult. I literally consciously made a decision. I'm going to stop earning income. And it happened for about 6 months. Thank God I actually had earned enough to kind of sustain life and pay the bills and all that. But in the background, I was building Xtreme One Financial and making the actual firm a legitimate, credible agency where I knew that if I looked elsewhere to find the culture within create a subculture within a culture, it was never going to happen. So the best thing that I could think of was create my own, right? Where you create really the kind of the top elite, no nonsense group of agents that really come to this industry to win big and serve big as well. So since then, a lot of people don't know this. I mean, I had left that agency at the $500,000 income mark, and I have since, more than doubled that. And I do it quietly. I do it quietly, and it's, for me, what's rewarding now is just being able to transfer that knowledge, that skill, to the agents that we do have. And I actually started a coaching business as well, as kind of a passion project, because over the years I've had so many agents reach out to me going, please, can you train us? Can you give us some tips? And I'm like, nah, you got to be part of my agency for it to even be worth my time. And they wouldn't leave. And I'm like, okay, well, cool. Nice knowing you. And I heard enough of that to where I'm like, wow, I want to open this up. Not for, really honestly, the true root of the reason is I can't go out there and save every client or consumer that's being served in the wrong way, because so many agents are just screwing things up because they don't know any better. And who hurts? The true victims are the consumers out there. I can't go out there and save every damn consumer, but what I can do is create an impact within the agent community, right? And up the standards and level of knowledge and skill to create an impact that will now reach the masses. And that was really a new shift in priority and in like the vision. And so yeah, Xtreme One Financial was born. We are our own independent agency. And if someone feels like they want to be an elite, be part of an elite culture, and they've always felt like, man, I've always wanted to excel in something. I've always wanted to be the best of the best. But I feel like where I'm at right now is kind of clouding that. That's the kind of individual and personality type that we're looking for.
Yeah, I will say 100% Danny's firm is above any others. I mean, I haven't been involved with different organizations. However, I have talked to several different agents, and what I have learned through Danny's company is that he has high standards. So his standards are above everyone else's, and it's very structured. So Danny, I appreciate you. I wanted to know more about, because we have training every week, and I love your trainings. Before it was 3 times a week. I do miss those, FYI, because
Yeah.
I felt like I was fed, multiple times. And so once a week is like, oh, I wish I had more. However, I value those because I'm glad that you're charging for coaching, because it is your time. For us, because we are your agents, it's free for us, right? So one of the things that I wanted to know was myths. We've talked about myths in your training. Can you share with us some myths, and if you can debunk those myths for us?
Okay. Are you talking about myths regarding like what the public at large believe or experience?
So let's talk about the public at large, because at this point, we are highly focused on tax-free retirement accounts. So majority of our clients, a lot of their retirement plans are funneled into a 401k or an IRA. So let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just start off by our company mission, which is a very simple acronym to remember, and it's called ERFT. And that stands for eliminating risk, fees, and taxes. Okay. In the way you save money and how you park it. Very simple, right? And you notice that acronym has nothing to do with a product. It has nothing to do with, something that's more self-serving. It has everything to do with an outcome that most people want, but they don't know where to find it, right? And their current strategies and instruments and vehicles aren't taking them there, right? So a big myth is that most people are doing something that is going to help them or take them to the promised land for retirement. And it's just simply not the truth, because you mentioned 401k, and oddly enough, 401k was never created for retirement, right? This was 401k, by the way, 401 subsection K of the IRC, Internal Revenue Code, right, was an obscure section in the Internal Revenue Code that was, I guess you could say, discovered by a guy named Ted Benna back in the 80s, right? To serve his clients that were fat cat CEOs to basically hedge on taxes, right? With the bonuses that they were getting on top of their salaries, right? And all of a sudden, that little loophole to defer taxes to pay later. So defer means, in essence, to pay later. And this little obscure code became and just morphed into America's retirement vehicle. And the reason why people associate 401ks and 403bs, 457 TSPs, if you work for the government, to retirement, because a lot of people don't know the history. They were replaced. Actually, those came in to replace pensions. Okay. Back in the day, most companies had pensions. And a pension, if you don't know what that is, a pension is basically a company perk that gives you a percentage of your salary when you retire until you die. The problem is that people aren't dying anytime soon anymore, right? People are living longer, and financial institutions said, man, this is really bad business to continue to give people a percentage of their salary until they die, and they're not dying anytime soon. Bad business. There's only maybe a handful of grandfathered type of private companies, separate and apart from your government jobs, right? City and county jobs, right? That still have pensions. But pensions have become a thing of the past. So it basically was replaced with the 401k, and employers got smart. They go, you know what? Why should we pay them anything? We'll just provide this product, and they're going to put up 100% of the capital. They're going to take 100% of the risk, and they're going to, if they're lucky, they're going to receive maybe 20 to 25% of the return at an age when they actually need it the most. I've never heard of someone, never, in the almost decade now, a little bit more than a decade in this industry, I've never heard of any one person said, oh my gosh, my 401k took me to the promised land. That was it. That was the answer. Now I can retire. Right? Because even that myth, here's another statement to that same myth, that those are designed for retirement. Lump sum, people can retire off of a lump sum of money. And that's not the truth, because so what? They have this, 401k, and maybe they have a larger lump sum of cash. Well, let's just do the math. And I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say someone has $400,000, right, in their 401k, right? Net. We're assuming that you've already paid tax on that. This is net, right? And they're like, wow, this is a lot of money, Danny. I did pretty well. Okay, well, let's do the math. If you're going to be in your retirement years for at least 20 years, $400,000 lump sum divided by 20 years, that's only $20,000 a year in income. How are you going to survive off of that? If you're living in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I do, you're still living in someone's closet. Okay, $20,000 a year, right? In income, that's not too exciting anymore, right? And so most people are never given any clarity on the finish line. So our agency and our agents really help people get clarity on that finish line, and they put their best foot forward to help the client to create solutions to try to fix that. We don't profess that we're going to create some kind of miracle, but this is what I always say. If you're not saving enough, and most people are grossly under saving for that inevitable time in their life, right? If you're not saving enough, then you got holes in the boat. You got holes in your financial boat. And all we do very well, I believe that we're the best in the world in helping people plug those holes in their financial boats. You know, those holes are bringing on, you know, if you're on a ship and you got holes in the boat, you're bringing on water that's going to eventually sink you. And I'm not trying to paint a doom and gloom for most people, but what I am saying is that if you have holes in the boat, it's bringing on risk, fees, and taxes. And those are drags to your finance. And people don't pay attention to that. And they can blink, and then now they're 10 years older, blink again, they're 20 years older, and they're like, oh my gosh, I think I should have done something. Right? It's very urgent. It's very, very urgent. So those are a few myths off the top of my head. You know, that 401ks and, you know, qualified plans like that are offered by an employer, that those are actually designed for retirement, and they are not. And also the other myth that I mentioned is that you can retire off of a lump sum, which is also another myth. You really can't, because that's a lump sum. So basically that means there's a finite shelf life to that dollar amount, right? You just need to do the math. Will it even last you? Okay. How many years will it last you? Retirement, as you already know, Jan, it's not about age. It's about income, right? And that's it. So we got to figure out strategies to get someone to where they can have more clarity so they can better plan for the future.
So let me ask, what defines a financial advisor versus a specialist?
Okay, well, that's more of a jargon terminology within our industry, right? Your typical financial advisors are these guys are the money managers of the world, right? These are the ones that are getting you set up with your 401ks, your IRAs, right? They're picking stocks, mutual funds, EFTs, things like that, right? Or ETFs, I should say, right? And they're not really specialists or have any training or experience or knowledge on how to help someone retire. And even if they are, and they're masquerading as, you know, retirement specialists, they're using the wrong instruments to do it. Because how can someone really and realistically plan on retiring someday when they're using an instrument or vehicle that offers you no protection to your money, that no guarantees of anything, right? How can you bank on that when the end destination is a certain place that you're going to end up? Like you're going to be, if you're 40 now, you're going to be 60, right? For example, right? So that's a certainty unless you die before that. Okay. If you are given an instrument or a vehicle that offers you no protection along the way, what if you're 60 and your money is in the market and you lost everything? What do you do? What do you do? Rebound at age 60? Imagine if I said, you know, let's rewind time back to 2008. There's an entire generation that were just turning 60 or 65 in 2008, and they were banking on their 401ks. But unfortunately, overnight, their 401ks turned into 201ks overnight. And their solution was, hi, welcome to Walmart. Remember, you know, you see these seniors greeting us in the front, you know, the front of Walmart. You think that's because they're bored? You think that they want to become greeters because they have nothing else better to do? No, because somewhere down the line of their journey, something happened. That was not what most of our seniors are aspiring to do, which is greet us at the front door of Walmart, right? They have to do it out of necessity because they've lost their way.
So what is your advice? What's your advice for people to plan for a better financial future?
Well, I would say, this is going to sound so generic. I would definitely talk to a specialist, right? That deals with tax-free solutions, right? that also helps you eliminate risk. This is a shameless plug here. Helps you eliminate risk, fees, and taxes. If you can talk to anyone that can help you eliminate those things, you're going to be much better off because you're getting rid of dead weight, right? Everyone is aiming for growth. Growth is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but if you have volatility, risk, and fees and taxes dragging that bottom line number down, what good is all the growth in the world if tomorrow the market crashes and you happen to be 65 on that day, or 60, whatever day that you decided to stop working, right? So I would definitely contact someone at Xtreme One Financial, right? To
I was just gonna say, I believe that anyone he's talking about is January Liddell, Helen Edwards, and Danny Singson.
Yeah. We have others, but someone could actually even start the journey and start maybe kind of learning some concepts, and they can go to our website as well.
Actually, we're going to segue into that. How can we find you, Danny?
Good. Well, so the website for the company is xtremeonefinancial.com. No E in front. So XTREME, the number 1, financial.com. All right. And someone can find and reach out to me just through social media as well. So they can find me at Danny Singson 1 on IG, or Danny Singson on Facebook.
And LinkedIn as well.
And LinkedIn, yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. You can find me, January Liddell, on LinkedIn, and then VIP Finance Builders on Facebook and Instagram, and my website, www.januaryliddell.com. Helen, where can we find you?
Yes. Thank you so much, Danny, for coming on. I feel like it's been such a honor to be a part of your team. I was first a client. Now I'm working with Xtreme One Financial. And like January said, I've learned so much. I'm still learning. I'm still, getting my feet wet, but I've just been so empowered through everything I've learned from you, Danny, and January actually too. So you trained her well, and she's doing well with us. So thank you. All right, everybody, awesome. You can find me, Helen Edwards, at Hell of a Journey or Sexy Freedom Media. You can go get my book, Nothing Sexier Than Freedom. It's available on Amazon and Audible. And we are here to help you with your financial services as well. So please reach out. All the links you can find in our show notes. So thank you, everybody, for listening today. Ahia.
Aloha.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.